Before diving into this incredible story, remember to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Here, every story has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. In the dark, narrow alleyways of New York, under the flickering light of a street lamp, Clara, a homeless woman with a sharp gaze and a surprisingly tender heart, rummaged through garbage cans looking for something to eat. Passers-by averted their eyes, some in a hurry, others with disdain. But that night, her fate would change forever. Between a bag of trash and an abandoned cardboard box, she glimpsed something strange, an elegant hand, gloved in leather, protruding from a pile of debris. Intrigued and frightened at the same time, Clara stepped back, then slowly approached. She carefully removed the object and discovered a man lying down, dressed in a black wool suit, his tie neatly knotted, his face pale but peaceful, as if sleep had overcome him. His eyes finally opened. Who are you?" he murmured in a weak voice. Clara, astonished by his fragility, replied, I'm just someone trying to survive." "But you were here, among the garbage?" The man, initially suspicious, gave a wry smile. I'm Richard Hamilton, a millionaire, and what you see is the result of my mistakes." Instead of thanking her, Richard burst out laughing, a dry, cynical laugh that made Clara shudder. "You're pulling me out of here, and for what? To see the world as it is? To understand that even the rich can fall so low?" Clara felt her heart sink. She had thought that helping a man was a noble and simple gesture. But the contempt in his eyes, the sarcasm in his voice, taught her that wealth protected neither from loneliness nor from bitterness. Yet, behind this apparent arrogance, Clara sensed a crack, a fragment of humanity that she could, perhaps, rekindle. New York, late at night. The streets were deserted, only a few flickering streetlights guiding the few hurried passers-by. Clara, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, was rummaging through a trash can behind a closed cafe. Her frail fingers brushed against a hard, cold object. It was a human hand, gloved in thin leather. Her heart pounding, she stepped back, then approached, driven by a mixture of curiosity and fear. Beneath the debris, a man lay, his dark suit stained with dust and trash. His eyes slowly opened, revealing an intense, calculating, steely gray. "Who are you?" he asked in a weak but authoritative voice. Clara stammered, I'm just. She hesitated, the words stuck in her throat. "My name is Clara. I didn't mean to hurt you." The man coughed, a dry laugh escaping his lips. "I'm Richard Hamilton, and I should hate you for finding me here. But perhaps it's a sign that I've already reached the bottom." Clara, taken aback by the cynical tone of the richly dressed man, felt a mixture of anger and pity. She reached out to help him up, but Richard gently pushed her away. "Keep your dirty hands to yourself, miss." Yet, despite his arrogance, he did not have the strength to get up on his own. Clara, determined, supported him and led him to a small shelter she knew, a dark but relatively safe place, where she could stay for the night. As he sat down, Richard looked around him, as if discovering for the first time a world he had ignored, the smell of dampness, the biting cold, the silence of poverty. And something in his gaze changed, just for a moment. A mixture of surprise and recognition. "I suppose I owe you something," he murmured, more to himself than to Clara. Clara smiled faintly, without saying anything. She knew that the real debt would lie elsewhere, in what he would learn about her, and about himself. In the early morning, the New York cold seeped into the small shelter where Clara had set up Richard. He was still sitting there, his gaze lost in the void, observing the crumbling walls as if they were another world. "So, what do you do for a living?" Clara ventured, breaking the silence. Richard burst into a dry, almost bitter laugh. "What am I doing? I'm Richard Hamilton, heir and CEO of Hamilton Industries. I own buildings, yachts, everything you can imagine." Clara frowned. "And yet, here you are, among the garbage." An ironic smile flickered across his lips. "Exactly. And that's life. No matter how wealthy you are, one moment of inattention and everything can collapse. Clara looked at him closely. Behind the mask of arrogance, she saw an exhausted, lonely, and lost man. She knew he wasn't used to asking for help. "You know," she said softly, "life isn't always what you think it is. You can fall, but you can also get back up." Richard turned his eyes to her, intrigued. There was something in her gaze, a strength he had never seen in anyone. "And you?" he asked. "You live on the streets, you rummage through garbage, how can you talk about getting back on your feet?" Clara shrugged. "I've learned that even in poverty, you can retain some dignity, and sometimes, helping someone can be more precious than all the money in the world." For the first time in a long time, Richard fell silent. He felt a strange curiosity. This girl, this stranger, dared to stand up to him without fear. She had no titles, no wealth, and yet, she commanded respect. "Very well," he said finally, a little hesitantly. "Perhaps I could accept your help. But know one thing, I am not easy to please. And I do not forgive easily." Clara smiled. "That's not a problem. I'm not here for you to forgive me. I'm just here to stop you from sinking any lower." Richard looked at her, genuinely impressed for the first time. A strange alliance had just been forged, between wealth and poverty, between loneliness and determination. But no one yet knew how far it would take them. In the following days, Clara took care of Richard with surprising determination. She brought him food she had found, washed his dusty clothes, and tried to convince him to walk a few steps outside to regain his strength. But Richard resisted. His pride was an invisible wall. "I don't need you for that," he grumbled one morning, arms crossed. "I'm a businessman, not a child." Clara shrugged, unperturbed. "And yet, you fell into a garbage can. Even businessmen need help." Richard's curt tone made her recoil for a moment, but there was a glint in his eyes, a curiosity he didn't dare admit. He realized that Clara wasn't judging him for his fall, but that she still saw something in him. You're strange," he murmured. Clara smiled, amused. "I'm just being realistic. And you'll have to be too if you want to survive." That was the moment Richard realized she wasn't just an ordinary homeless woman. She possessed an inner strength that even her wealth couldn't buy. And that idea both disturbed and intrigued him. Later that day, they went out for a short walk. Richard, clumsy and stiff, stumbled on the sidewalk like a child. Clara patiently supported him. "You need to relearn how to walk in the real world," she told him gently. At that precise moment, an incident occurred. A stray dog suddenly appeared and knocked Richard over. Instinctively, Clara grabbed it, but Richard froze, terrified, as if the fall had awakened a feeling of helplessness that he refused to acknowledge. "This is ridiculous," he grumbled, catching his breath. "I'm Richard Hamilton. I shouldn't." Clara placed her hand on his arm and looked him straight in the eyes. "You are human. Nothing more, nothing less. And that's what you have to accept." For the first time, Richard felt that his wealth was worthless compared to the fragility of his own life. And he understood that Clara, this homeless woman he would have previously despised, was perhaps the only one capable of bringing him back to himself. A few days after their release, Richard and Clara were beginning to find a fragile balance. He was gradually accepting his vulnerability, while she was learning to understand the emotional wounds behind her pride. But the tranquility could not last. That morning, while Clara was preparing a meager breakfast, Richard's mobile phone, forgotten on the floor, vibrated. He grabbed it hesitantly. The screen displayed the name of Margaret, his trusted secretary of 10 years. His heart sank. What was she doing at that hour? "Richard? Are you all right?" asked Margaret, her voice trembling but hurried. "You've disappeared. Everyone's worried. The press, your partners, they're starting to talk." Richard sighed, looking away. I needed time. The only person here to help me think." Clara watched him silently, her intuition telling her that something bigger was brewing. She sensed Richard's stress rising, and his arrogance resurfaced, this time masked by fear. "Very well," Margaret said insistently. "But you must come back, or someone might complicate things." Richard hung up, his face grim. "Clara. I don't think the outside world is going to leave me alone for long." Clara placed her hand on his. "Then we will have to face this world together. You are not alone." A few hours later, a black vehicle stopped abruptly in front of the shelter. Two men in suits got out, looking hurried, clearly searching for Richard. "Mr. Hamilton?" one of them asked. "You must come immediately." Richard stood up slowly, his heart pounding. Clara felt her worry growing, but she remained resolute. "You're not going alone," she said. Richard looked at her, surprised by her resolve. "Why are you so determined to stay with me?" Clara shrugged. "Because sometimes people need someone who won't judge them for their fall. And you need me more than you think." Thus began the confrontation with the outside world, where money and power would clash with courage and humanity. And Richard understood that, for the first time in his life, he could not make it on his own. Richard and Clara left the shelter, their hearts heavy but resolute. The outside world awaited them, crowded streets, honking cars, and above all, the invisible pressure of business and power. The two men in suits were waiting for them just a few meters away. "Mr. Hamilton, you must come to headquarters immediately," one of them said, his voice hurried but respectful. "There are crucial meetings, and—" Richard gestured to stop them. "Wait. I'm not ready to come back as if nothing happened." Clara placed her hand on his arm. "Listen, Richard. You can keep your pride, but you have to be true to yourself. The world will see your weaknesses, whether you like it or not." He sighed, feeling his mask slip. For the first time in years, he let go of his arrogance and self-assurance. "Very well. But I don't want you to suffer because of me," he said softly, almost vulnerably. Clara smiled. "I won't suffer. You've already taught me so much." Upon entering Hamilton Industries headquarters, Richard was confronted with a reality he had carefully ignored: the panic of his employees, the curiosity of the journalists, and the whispers of his business partners. But Clara remained by his side, silent yet resolute, offering him a strength that no contract or wealth could buy. "You see?" Clara murmured as Richard stared at the worried faces around him. "The world isn't as cruel as it seems, as long as you're not alone." Richard looked at her, astonished by the depth of her words. For the first time, he understood that helping someone, even someone of his own station, could be more powerful than any fortune. However, an even greater challenge awaited him. The press had noticed his disappearance, and soon the truth about his fall among the debris would be revealed. Richard had to decide: conceal this truth to save his image, or accept his vulnerability and learn to change. And so Clara and Richard prepared to face their greatest challenge, together. No sooner had Richard returned to the business world than the storm broke. Journalists had spotted his disappearance, and rumors circulated on social media: a millionaire found among the garbage, supposedly the victim of a mysterious accident. In his luxurious office, Richard felt the stress rising. His partners and colleagues, initially relieved to see him, exchanged worried glances and whispers. No one knew how to react to this public humiliation. Clara remained silent beside him, but her gaze was penetrating. "You must be honest," she murmured. "Not with them, but with yourself. The world may not forgive, but you must choose your truth." Richard shook his head nervously. "They'll judge me, they'll never understand that you needed help." Clara added. "Exactly. And that's human." The day was a whirlwind of tense meetings and impromptu interviews. Every word Richard said was scrutinized, every gesture analyzed. His employees looked at him with a mixture of respect and suspicion. Some pitied him, others judged him. But in every difficult moment, Clara remained there, reminding him of what truly mattered. "You are more than your image, Richard. You are what you decide to be now." That evening, in the silence of his office, Richard collapsed into an armchair. Clara. I don't know if I'll ever be able to go back to who I was. She placed her hand on his. It's not who you were that matters. It's who you become. And I know you can do it. For the first time, Richard felt a strength that no power or money could give him, the certainty that someone believed in him, unconditionally. But the real ordeal wasn't over. A decision had to be made: continue to hide the truth and preserve her image, or accept her vulnerability and rebuild her life with Clara, and face the public consequences. The next morning, Richard stood in front of the large bay window of his office, watching the city awaken. The weight of the decisions he had to make pressed on his chest. Should he protect his image, or finally show his true vulnerability to the world? Clara, standing behind him, observed his silence. You know, she said softly, the world can be cruel, but hiding the truth won't protect you. Sometimes you have to take a step into the unknown to become human again. Richard sighed and took a deep breath. He knew she was right. He could no longer run from his fall, nor ignore what this experience had taught him. Later that day, a press conference was held. The journalists were eager, and some were already whispering sensational rumors about her mysterious disappearance. Richard entered, alongside Clara. Their presence side by side surprised those present. He spoke, his voice firm but humble. These past few days have been eye-opening. I have literally fallen into a situation I never could have imagined. But I have discovered that money, power, and pride are no substitute for dignity, compassion, and helping others. The journalists exchanged surprised glances. Clara stood by his side, calm and confident, a silent but essential support. And this person, Richard continued, pointing at her, reminded me what it means to be human. Her name is Clara. She lives in conditions that many would consider hopeless, and yet she possesses a strength and wisdom I have never encountered anywhere in my world. A hush fell over the room. Richard had chosen to reveal his downfall, his humiliation, but also his humanity. And, at the same time, he brought Clara, the stranger who had become his guide, into the spotlight. At that precise moment, he realized that his life would never be the same again. He had chosen the truth, even at the cost of his reputation, and he felt a strange lightness, as if he were reborn. Clara smiled, and for the first time, Richard looked at her not as a savior, but as a partner, someone who had transformed his fall into a true beginning. After the conference, the outside world seemed to change around Richard. The media, initially shocked, began to tell his story from a different angle, that of a millionaire confronted with his vulnerability and a young woman with exceptional courage. Richard spent the following days reorganizing his business, but this time with a fresh perspective. He listened to his employees, made more humane decisions, and was willing to admit when he was wrong. Clara, by his side, was no longer just an assistant, she was becoming his ally, his mirror of reality. One afternoon, while they were working in his office, Richard watched Clara reorganize some papers with astonishing efficiency. "You're incredible, Clara," he said, genuinely impressed. "I never would have believed that someone living on the streets could have so much discernment and logic." Clara shrugged modestly. "Life has taught me how to survive, Richard. And sometimes, you have to know how to make difficult decisions clearly, even in chaos." Richard felt a surge of respect and admiration for her. But what touched him most was her ability to remind him of what really mattered: humanity, simplicity, and the courage to remain true to oneself. One evening, after a long day, they sat on the terrace of Richard's building, overlooking the city lights. A soothing silence reigned between them. "Clara," Richard began hesitantly, "I don't know how to thank you. You saved me, not just physically, but from myself." Clara smiled, but her eyes shone with an emotion she never showed to anyone. "You don't need to thank me, Richard. Just stay true to yourself." Richard nodded, feeling that this experience had transformed him. His wealth and power were tools, but what truly mattered was the strength he had found through the friendship and trust he never imagined receiving from a stranger. And in that silent moment, a deep bond began to form between them, a bond that went far beyond gratitude. A few weeks later, as Richard was gradually regaining control of his life and his company, a new challenge arose. An influential investor, unhappy with the public disclosure of his downfall, began spreading rumors, threatening the stability of Hamilton Industries. Richard felt the pressure mounting. The company's stock was faltering, and some partners were threatening to leave. For the first time, he faced a dilemma: protect his image and risk losing everything he had rebuilt, or be honest and face the consequences. Clara, still at his side, looked at him with quiet firmness. "You can't back down now," she said. "Everything you've learned, everything you've become, it's worth more than any reputation." Richard took a deep breath. He knew she was right, but the fear of failure still gripped him. "What if I lose everything?" he asked, his voice trembling. Clara placed her hand on his. "Then you will at least have gained what really matters, your honesty and self-confidence. And you won't be alone." That night, Richard made a bold decision. He called an emergency meeting with his partners and gave a heartfelt speech, acknowledging his fall, his mistake, and the importance of the person who had helped him get back on his feet. Clara was by his side, and every word he spoke resonated with courage and humility. The shock was immense, but the effect was even more powerful. The partners saw a different man, a leader capable of admitting his weaknesses and transforming himself. The press, which had expected public shame, now relayed the story of a rebirth, that of Richard Hamilton, and of Clara, the woman who had changed his life. At the end of the meeting, Richard turned to Clara. "I don't know how to thank you, really," he murmured. She smiled simply. "You don't need to say thank you. Just, keep being true to yourself." That moment sealed their mutual trust. They knew now that together, they could weather any storm. But one last obstacle still awaited them: Richard's fear of opening his heart to someone from the outside, to someone like Clara. Weeks passed, and Richard Hamilton's life was finally beginning to find its balance again. His company was stable, his reputation restored, and he had learned the value of humility and sincerity. But one last obstacle remained: his heart. He couldn't ignore the profound impact Clara had had on him. She wasn't just the one who had saved him from the garbage, she had become his guide, his mirror, and the only person capable of seeing the man he truly was behind his suit and his fortune. One autumn evening, they were walking together on the rooftops of New York, the city lights twinkling around them. Richard broke the silence. "Clara, I don't know how to tell you everything you mean to me. I'm afraid of what I feel." Clara looked at him, calm but attentive. "Fear is normal," she said softly. "But sometimes you have to accept what you feel and take the step, even if it's frightening." Richard took a deep breath and turned to her. "Clara, I love you. You've changed my life in a way I never thought possible. I don't want to hide who I am or what I feel anymore, especially not for you." An emotional silence enveloped them both. Clara smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "And I love you too, Richard. Not for your money, not for your status, but for the man you've become because of this experience." For the first time, Richard felt that his fall, his vulnerability, and everything he had been through had been worth it. Wealth had never seemed so insignificant compared to the love, trust, and bond they now shared. They drew closer, and in that suspended moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. What had begun as an unlikely encounter among the garbage had transformed into a rebirth, not only for Richard, but for both of them. Richard had learned that a real life isn't measured in money or power, but in humanity, courage, and love. And Clara, who had seen the man behind the millionaire, had found a family, a partner, and a home in Richard's heart. Under the lights of New York, two souls that everything seemed to separate had finally found each other, ready to face the future together, hand in hand, without fear, with truth and love.